Hi, everyone. Welcome to our training. I'm so excited you're here. I feel like our last session was really awesome and had so much good collaboration. So I'm excited to do this one and give you guys the information you need to get the research put into your classroom and really simplify what you're doing and focus on what really matters and works with students. So that's what we're doing today. If you have any technology issues, I promise if it's on our end, we'll send you an email or a text. Likely in a panic. Luckily, that hasn't happened in a while. But if you're having an issue with like audio or the video's cutting out or something, check your internet and then try refreshing or the page or try it on a different device. Occasionally, we get weird device issues. So that's my advice there. We will be watching the inbox in case we have any issues, and then we'll send out a replay so that you have access to that as well. So I can't wait to get straight into it. I don't want to waste any time because this is a full 90-minute training. And so we're going to get straight into that right now. While I'm switching things over, if you haven't introduced yourself already, please do so in the chat so that you can also make sure that you can access the chat and everything's good to go there. So, and that way I know who I am training so that I can make some modifications based off of what you guys need. So today we're really focusing on the research behind writing instruction and what you can do to implement it in your classroom. So I'm going to share some very simple strategies that you can use to implement the research. I'm not just going to give you the research, but I'm going to provide those strategies that align to it. As we go through the training, I'll show you exactly what you need to do to align your classroom for each section. I might challenge your beliefs a little bit. I know we've all had training and even curriculum and materials in the past that have not met the research behind writing instruction. And so this might be challenging your beliefs just because we have heard so many misconceptions and we need to clear those up. So if you're here because you're looking to update your instructional practices, you're trying to follow the science of reading, but you're not really sure where writing fits in, then you're in the right place. Maybe you're here because your students struggle with basic writing skills and you're really looking for help with that. And this is something very common because we have let writing instruction kind of fall behind a little bit. And so we're seeing a lot of skill gaps in our students. Or maybe you're just wanting to focus on quality writing instruction next year, but you don't have time, training, or resources, so you're a little overwhelmed. So you're definitely in the right place if that's how you feel. My name is April Smith. If you have not attended one of my trainings before or worked with me, I am the author of Simplify Your Writing Instruction. I wrote this book because I felt like there was a gap in the professional development regarding writing that talked about how to actually set up the writing block, provide direct, explicit instruction, and also make modifications so that we can meet the needs of our varying learners. So we know that all of our writers have different skill gaps and tailoring our lessons to them can be quite a challenge. So wanted to share my simple system to do that without needing too much extra time, putting in too much extra effort, or having to have more individualized lessons than we have time for. I have been teaching since 2008. I have also been a district writing trainer, so I have definitely heard and experienced all of the struggles that you were dealing with writing instruction. When I did district writing training, I worked a lot with the younger grades, so K2, and so those struggles were eye-opening to me because I had been a upper elementary teacher for a while, and seeing what our kinder, first, and second grade teachers were doing all day, every day, and how much work they were putting in towards these lessons was just amazing. So being able to support them and provide the tools that they needed was very satisfying. And so that really led me to start working online with teachers and schools that were looking for some help with their writing instruction, but weren't really able to find it locally. So I'm really honored to be able to continue to do that and to work with all of you. So thank you so much for being here, and it's very nice to meet you all. And thank you for introducing yourself in the chat because it was really nice to see where everybody is from and what everybody teaches. Make sure that you stay until the end of the training. I don't like to let you all leave without any actionable items that will help you get started. And so with this training, I'm going to be providing a full month of lesson plans that follow the research. It has all of the teacher and student materials, so you'll be completely good to go for a full month. And this is going to be for kinder through 8th grade. So those are the grade levels that I have available right now. If you are a high school teacher and you're joining us, we always recommend the 8th grade lessons. For a lot of our students in high school, those are on level, and most of our high school teachers have good luck with those. So definitely stay and grab them so that we can help support your students. Okay, let's start by evaluating 3 classrooms. We're going to see some elements that seem like they would be a good thing to have because they're things that do sometimes work well in education. But we're going to see a couple of classrooms overall that don't really follow the research because they're missing some key parts. Or they're taking the focus off of where it needs to be. So while we're going through these classrooms, I want you to think about which one you think is the one that best follows the research. We'll see if you can guess in the chat after. Okay, so classroom number 1 is a workshop model. Students work at their own pace. So our students are all on different places. If we are doing any instruction, it might not be exactly where the students are. It prioritizes student voice and choice over direct, explicit instruction. Of course, voice and choice is very important. It makes the students the teachers, and it introduces skills in isolation. So it's not relating to reading or even necessarily within the writing piece. Classroom number 2 incorporates writing into the other subject areas by having students complete written responses in social studies, science, math, reading, etc. Teaches grammar through short practice activities outside the context of writing when the teacher has time. And it walks students through the writing process in a week when time is found for writing instruction, because you have to fit it in, right? We have to get those writing pieces done. They're required. We got to get them in as fast as possible because we don't have time. Classroom number 3 teaches writing in a way that's explicit and systematic, which helps students build transferable skills. It uses data to pinpoint learning gaps and make modifications in the lessons. It makes connections between reading, writing, and other subject areas. And it balances student voice and choice with teacher direction. Okay, so which one do you think best follows the research? And I know that this might be a little easy because I cannot go through this part without leading or making a small comment on some of the things in there that don't follow the research. So I probably made it too obvious, and that's fine. And I can see that a lot of people are getting it right in the chat. If you want to add to your answer and just say, what do you think in the other, like which ones really jumped out to you in the other 2 classrooms that concern you, that you'd think probably are working against the research. So you can add that to your comment as well. Okay, so classroom number 1. Why is this one not following the research? Well, the workshop model following work at their own pace does not directly correlate with our systematic direct instruction that we need. The research supports this time and time again. If we are giving direct, explicit writing instruction in a systematic way, we have to have students apply that information that same day. So if they're working at, they're a little behind or they're a little ahead, then they're not really doing that. Student voice and choice is very important. However, we do need direct, explicit instruction, and we do need to heavily scaffold it. So if you notice that you're doing a sort of workshop model and your students are able to have a lot of voice and choice, more so than your scaffolding or what you are teaching, and you notice your students are really struggling to brainstorm, to get that writing on their paper, that's why. So we want to make sure there is more scaffolding. We'll talk a lot about that in this training. Makes the students the teachers, so that's not a bad thing if you're in the application phase, but in the instructional phase, you need to be the teacher. And introduces skills in isolation. We just don't want to do that. That was probably the one that gave it away the most. So why not classroom number 2? Well, it incorporates writing into the other subject areas by having students complete written responses. That's not a bad thing, but that's the application phase. So what we're missing here is direct, explicit instruction. Grammar is short practice activities. It's not in the context of their writing piece, so they can't apply it to their writing, which means that they're likely not going to master that grammar skill. And then we're really rushing through the writing piece, just trying to get it done instead of focusing on the skills that they need along the way. So this is a classroom that very much mirrors my first year teaching and maybe even my second, because I felt very rushed and very unprepared when it came to writing. So why classroom number 3? Well, this first one is the biggest part of the research, which is having explicit and systematic lessons. It helps students build transferable skills. It's absolutely what we need in our classrooms. We're using data to pinpoint learning gaps and make modifications to the lessons, which is something that my book focuses on and some of my other trainings focus on quite heavily, because this is something that really helps our writers finally start not making the same mistakes over and over again and improving overall with their writing abilities. It makes connections between reading, writing, and the other subject areas, so important. And then student choice and voice and choice is still there, but we still have teacher direction and heavy scaffolding so that our students are doing what they need to be doing and they're learning the skills they need to learn without feeling like they're not getting enough direction. Okay, so let's take a moment to share. Tell me what you have noticed about your students' writing abilities in the last 5 years. So I like to ask this question because I get a lot of quite wild answers, and it really cements the fact that we need this training. Okay, I see many comments about spelling being an issue, handwriting being an issue. I completely agree. We've seen this quite often. And I'm seeing a lot of people say that their students are very behind in writing, including a high school teacher who says their students are very behind. So, and my husband is a high school teacher, so I can definitely relate. He teaches English and government, and in both classes, he often has students who really struggle to write a paragraph. And he tries to provide very explicit templates, and it is definitely still a struggle because they don't have that foundation. So for my high school teachers in here, I know there's not that many of you, but I promise we are really working hard in K through 8 to make sure we have that foundation. Okay, yeah, thank you guys for sharing. I don't want this to be a negative thing. This is something that we're going to turn into a positive, because yes, we have noticed that our students' writing skills are down. The reason for that is 100% the fact that we don't have the time or materials to dedicate to that. And so we're really going to focus on that in this training. And then we're going to see that improvement. So we have a lot of great things to learn about today. And we're going to see how this will affect our students as we hit each section. So it's not the case in every single school or classroom that writing has been neglected, but it's very, very common. So we're going to talk about what the research says and why it's so important that we're not neglecting this when we're considering our literacy block and we're considering what we're doing with reading, because writing is really closely tied into this piece. So without the writing piece, we're not going to get the success that we want with the reading piece, and vice versa. So very important that we look at the science when it comes to writing instruction. So we know what the science of reading is, right? It just describes a vast body of research about reading and issues related to reading and writing. Now, reading is the main focus, but there's definitely some things there's definitely some research around writing that we should be following. Now, this is something that goes way back. This is not something new, right? This is not a new piece of research. This is all research that we've known about. It's just the fact that we haven't necessarily all utilized it because we've been taught different things. So we're going to really focus on the takeaways that we see from literacy research that show the part writing has in the literacy instruction. So that's our focus for this training. So the research says that a structured literacy approach is preferred, and this advocates for that, the science of reading, and it has to incorporate both reading and writing instruction. So very important that we have that writing piece, so we do not forget about it. And most importantly, writing should be taught in a way that's explicit and systematic, which helps students build transferable skills. So when you see the research, you're going to see that time and time again. The direct, explicit, and systematic instruction is what has the best outcomes. So the evidence shows that these elements are the most effective for writing skill acquisition, first being systematic, explicit instruction. I am going to get sick of saying this during the training because it is on nearly every slide. And that is because it is the key to making sure that your students gain the knowledge that they need around writing. Just like direct, systematic instruction in reading is what our students are going to need to learn to read. So using graphic organizers, integration with reading, so important, modeling and exemplar usage, and consistent and timely feedback. So these are the 5 things that the research says are most important, and this is what we're going to go over in this training. So we're going to break down each and every one of them and see what that looks like in the classroom and how we can incorporate it in using very simple strategies. So why does systematic explicit instruction work? Well, like in reading, our students are not natural writers. It's a skill that must be taught. So we need explicit instruction because studies show that providing it is crucial for supporting their writing development. So we often see ELA curriculum that only includes application of writing, missing the systematic instruction students need to build their writing skills. So this, I think, is the root of why we have had our students struggle so much with writing in the past. Lack of time is a big one, but also lack of curriculum that gives direct, systematic instruction. A lot of ELA curriculum now is trying to incorporate more writing instruction, but it's still not enough. So we definitely need to have a plan for how we can make sure that our students are getting direct, explicit instruction for every single skill that they need. So there's a lot of research to back this up. I am a big fan of Dr. Timothy Shanahan, who has been saying for years and been pushing back for years that effective writing instruction needs to be explicit. We took for a while there. We were kind of saying, our students need to have voice and choice. They need to be directing the writing. And as someone who's a big proponent of project-based learning, I definitely agree that a lot of that is important. Participation, engagement, voice, and choice is important. But we know that our students learn best when they get direct instruction. So that has to be a part of it. So I really do agree with this, and the research does as well. So each systematic, explicit lesson should focus on one key skill. So we do not want to overwhelm our students. It should model how to use this skill in writing, using auditory, visual, and kinesthetic elements. So we want our students to retain the information. It should have the students apply the skill in their own work immediately after. And we have to break the writing process into manageable pieces for clarity. So this is what good writing instruction looks like at the base level, which is you have a lesson that focuses on one key skill. You are modeling it in a very engaging way where your students are actively participating instead of taking notes. You have students apply the skill immediately after in the same way, using the same organizers that you did for their writing. There's a lot of pushback on this because a lot of teachers are concerned their students are going to copy, which does happen sometimes. But because of the fact that we're doing direct, explicit instruction, they are getting those skills, they are using those skills, and then if we have an issue where they're copying, we can work to help them put in their own words, make revisions, add things, add details. There are many steps during the writing process where they're sharing ideas and putting those into their text. So it's not as much of an issue as you think it is. So any tool or concept you want them to use must be modeled as a part of your direct, explicit instruction. So this example right here is a lesson where we are creating a topic sentence and we are creating transitions and elaborations. So this is definitely a more than one piece, but we have been working to model adding elaborations to what the students already have. So we do that in our writing through this model, and we have our students do it in their writing as well. So their organizer and their writing is going to look very similar to how we have ours set up, and we're really breaking down this piece. So I use this example because I often see teachers teach a list of elaborations, and I've done this before as well. They use an anchor chart, they list out all the different types of elaborations, and they tell their students to do one. Now, what's missing there is showing the students how to take that elaboration and apply it to their writing. And so that's what this lesson does. Okay, so let's look at what systematic explicit instruction looks like. And I'm not going to go over every single grade level, but I have a couple different ones as an example. This is kindergarten, so this is breaking down a writing piece into 10 days. So we have brainstorming and planning. We have a couple other planning pieces. Because we are working with students who are very new to literacy, we are breaking things down like supporting with reasons can, using the word can. Then the next day we're using the word have, and the next day we're using the word are. So we are very heavily scaffolding this sentence. Then we have an introduction, we have a body, and a conclusion. Now you might be thinking, oh my gosh, that is a lot for our students to be doing at the kindergarten level. Okay, this is not something that you have to worry about being at the beginning of the school year. This is a unit that is towards the end of the year. And when we say introduction, we're talking about one sentence. When you talk about body, we're talking about 1 to 2 sentences, depending on the students and their ability levels. With conclusion, you're talking about one sentence. So we are working together to write these sentences one at a time. So this is not this huge paragraph, right? Heavily, heavily scaffolded. But we're breaking it down piece by piece and setting them up for success. Then we're working on revising, editing, and publishing skills. Here's what it might look like in 3rd grade. You're probably thinking, wow, 15 days, that is a lot of time to dedicate to one writing piece. Well, remember that we have very short blocks of time. And so we're really focusing in those blocks of time on really small skills that are going to build to that overall piece. So it's not about rushing through to get a writing piece done in a week like we saw in that one classroom example. It's about learning those skills, and eventually they end up with a writing piece at the end. So I always like to say it's not about the destination, it's about the journey. So we start by looking at the elements of opinion writing. We start with brainstorming. We break that into 2 pieces because audience, and we're using a reference text for this one. So this is, all of these are later in the year with our students. These are opinion units. And we want to bring in that reference text to show our students how to start using reference text. So we're bringing in that reading. We're going to be starting to teach them in 3rd grade how to provide evidence from a text. We have a day for organization. We have a day for leads, background information, claims, and so forth. So we're really breaking this into small pieces. Especially in 3rd grade, there's a big transition between 2nd and 3rd, where we're looking for our students to do more complex skills for writing. And so we do need to have these very broken down. This is what it might look like at the middle school level. So in the middle school, we are relying heavily on other text and research. And so we do really break down research. We walk our students through it. We don't just blindly have them start researching. So you can see that reflected here on day 2 and 3. We also really focus on breaking down our body paragraphs. So we have our main body paragraphs, we have our counterclaim and rebuttal, we have our respectful disagreement. These are all elements that are very tricky for kids. So these are something we really want to break down. So I always like to share some feedback from teachers who have worked with me in the past so that you can see that this does work in real classrooms. So Gina had shared with me that her bite-sized explicit lesson pieces have helped her class a lot. So she was really focusing on getting things done fast and trying to fix all the problems afterwards instead of breaking it down in a systematic way. So this gave her the permission to really take the time to teach those skills, break it down for her students, and she noticed that her students have become way more confident in writing. So systematic direct instruction is not just for whole group. This can also be used one-on-one, whole group, etc. So this is not something where we only have to be doing this whole group. There's a big focus on writing conferences in this space, but I have to say that what I found the most success with is using student work time in the upper grades with small group skill reteach. And that can be very, very powerful because you're able to work on that skill with a group of students who all struggle with it together. And it can be less overwhelming than writing conferences. So we are going to talk about conferences and how to do them right and how to fit them in. But I have to say, if you're somebody that just really struggles with those, it's not the only answer to help support your students. So research does support, of course, quality and timely feedback, but there's lots of ways to do that. So here's how to align to your classroom. First of all, have time set aside for whole group writing instruction. I know that is a challenge. I know especially as you get into the middle grades, it's a challenge. For elementary, 30 to 45 minutes, about 4 times a week, 4 to 5 times a week is preferable. 3 times, maybe, if that's what you have. If you want to do 3 45-minute blocks, that would be good, but I prefer more often with a shorter block. You don't need mastery of every skill to move on, but if they're completely lost, it's a good time to take a pause and evaluate the lesson and their needs. So that goes along with if students struggle with a skill, break it down into smaller pieces. Make sure that your writing process is broken down into simple systematic lessons. So as you go to plan your lessons, have it broken down like I had, where you have one skill each day. So these are very simple ways that you can align your classroom to the research when it comes to systematic direct instruction. Okay, let's take a moment to tell me what shifts you're going to make to provide systematic direct writing instruction in your classroom. If you are already providing it, that is amazing. Let me know what you're doing. Let me know how you started with this systematic direct writing instruction and your outcomes. So I'll give you guys a little time because that's a lot to type. Okay, I'm seeing quite a few people note that they are going to set time aside and really focus on breaking down the skills. So that's awesome. That was the takeaway I wanted from this part. So I'm so happy to hear that. I also saw a few people who are already doing that. That's awesome. Shout out to the couple people who mentioned that they were using Simplify Writing for this. We are so happy to be able to support you with that. I know we've seen a lot of great outcomes in these classrooms from that direct writing instruction piece. So the next element is graphic organizers. Now, this is not something that is completely new to you. I'm sure you use many graphic organizers in your classroom. And studies do show that if they use a concept mapping learning strategy like a graphic organizer, they do better and retain what they learn longer than students who are using text-only strategies. So this is something where we really want to focus on quality over quantity. So we do see that there are many graphic organizers used in classrooms for writing. However, we need to make sure that they're taught how to use them. That's key right there. And also, and that's through modeling, right? That's very important that we model it. We use the graphic organizer ourselves. And we want to make sure that they provide scaffolded opportunities to organize their thoughts that aren't too open-ended. So using a simple graphic organizer for something like a brain dump is not direct or explicit enough. So if you've struggled in the past with certain curriculum or just having your students try to do brain dumps or write down as many things as they can think of as fast as possible, and you've noticed that students get really stuck, it's because those organizers are not direct or explicit enough. You may also be missing the modeling as well. But for a lot of students, they really, really, really need something that is almost more of a template than a graphic organizer for certain pieces. So you'll see that in this example, this is like a writing paragraph template. So I wouldn't really consider this to be a traditional graphic organizer, but I do consider it to be a way that we are organizing our thoughts and information. And I use this especially with when we have a high population of English language learners because it really helps break down each piece. This can be used where there's just information on the left side. So you can see the exposition in there. rising action and conflict, climax, falling action, resolution. And this can be done without anything in the right-hand column where they are brainstorming it. But in the right-hand column in this example, I use some sentence frames so that the students who need that support, especially English language learners, can get that support. So graphic organizers can be used for more than just brainstorming or planning. They can be used for really supporting and scaffolding for students who need it. So if your students are using it, you should be using it yourself while modeling, and more than once. Okay, so even if it's just a simple graphic organizer like this, where you're separating the subject and the action with your younger kids, this is something that if you use it to build a sentence, they're going to use it to build a sentence, and you're going to heavily model it, show them how to use it, and then have them apply that in their own writing with this organizer. Now, I know I'm probably have a few of you who are thinking, these don't really seem like traditional graphic organizers. And yes, that's because they are heavily supportive for students. They are more scaffolded. This doesn't mean that we don't use simple graphic organizer where they're brainstorming on a topic, and it's just, a space for them to brainstorm for a topic. But most of the time when I use graphic organizers, it is very scaffolded and heavily modeled. So here's how to align this element to your classroom. First, choose graphic organizers that provide support and clear directions. So of course you're going to be modeling it, but you want whatever is on the graphic organizer to direct your students on what they need to do. So for example, if your students are working on a writing piece, let's say it's informational, and you have in the middle of the graphic organizer, you have information on my topic, and they're supposed to write information on their topic. That's very general. It does not provide a very clear direction. So what you could do instead is have a part on the graphic organizer that has, list 4 facts about your topic, and they put the topic at the top. List 4 questions people often have about this topic. So that is going to be more of a scaffolded way for our students to brainstorm than just having to think about random things that they want to write. It'll also be easier for them to organize when they get into that phase because they have that information in a way where it's already pretty organized. And then always, always, always make sure they align to your lessons and that you model them. Okay, let's take a moment to share. So let me know, which graphic organizers do you currently use that work really well with your students? And which ones do your students struggle with? So try to think of an example of each, or you can just share a struggle or one that works well. I definitely know that I've seen so many different types of graphic organizers in the last 15 years, and some work really well for my kids, and some are just really confusing and just end up with them having random information on their page. So I'm interested to hear what you all like and dislike. Okay, I see a lot of people sharing things. I think it looks like a lot of the thinking maps are still being used. I saw that a couple of teachers shared that their students struggle with the more open-ended organizers. So I agree, that's been my experience as well, especially with our students who are English language learners. So the more scaffolding, the better for those kids, and really for all kids, let's be honest. Scaffolding things and giving direct instruction and really modeling how we use the graphic organizers will set any kid up for success. It's the same with us as adults, right? We want to see exactly what it looks like in practice, and we want to know exactly how to do it step by step. So we're going to bring that into our writing instruction with our graphic organizers as well. Thank you guys for sharing. Okay, let's talk about element number 3, which is integration with reading. And this is where I think we end up with the most misconceptions from the research, because we read that reading and writing are tied together, which we know they are, and we think that writing must be a part of the reading instruction, which doesn't give us time for the actual writing instruction. So we need to remember when we see this research that this does not mean that writing does not need a time of its own. It means that it's taught alongside reading, and we're relating it to reading. And while we're doing reading, we're relating that to writing. So there's going to be writing and reading, and there's going to be reading and writing, but we still have direct, explicit instruction in both. So application of writing is not a substitute for that direct, systematic instruction. Unfortunately, in the upper grades, we often forgo that direct instruction and only do application activities in the name of saving time and calling it integration. So we have to stop doing that. Okay, so let's look at what integration with reading is and what it is not. So first of all, we want to make sure we're using the phonics skills taught during direct systematic reading instruction to encode words. This is, of course, for K2. But when we're talking about spelling patterns as we get into the upper grades, we are still relating that phonics piece. This is not having students copy down letters and words without teaching organized writing skills. So working on things like letter formation is very important, and showing that in reading is very important, but we still have to teach the organized writing skills. So we want to, of course, incorporate quality text for students to interact with during writing lessons, like reference text. So that is a good integration piece. This is not having students craft written responses to their reading and then calling it a day. So applying their writing skills by crafting written responses is great, but it's not enough. We do not want to miss that direct instruction. This can also look like encouraging authentic output activities that allow for others to read what students write. That is a great way to integrate with reading. And we want to make sure we stay away from trying to just finish a writing assignment to get it done and graded, right? That's not the purpose. The purpose is we're writing it for our audience. And we want to incorporate writing tasks that require students to apply and extend their reading comprehension skills. So this means we're going to break that down because we need to make sure that we are doing text-based writing and we are using that writing to apply and extend their reading comprehension skills, especially in the upper grades. This is not allowing students to choose what they write about with no connection to text on a topic. We do not want to do that. Again, my beef with open-ended writing lessons partially is the lack of systematic direct instruction, but also the fact that we don't have the text that the student needs to connect to and to provide in their writing. So we do have to provide things like prompts and scaffolds and walk them through the writing process. It has to be done if we want our students to succeed. So here's that big connection between reading and writing. We know from the research that phonemic awareness predicts later outcomes in reading and spelling. So it's very important that as part of our writing instruction, we are making sure that there's that connection with phonemic awareness, especially in the younger grades. And we also know from the research that the majority of readers who struggle have a lot of difficulty with phoneme awareness and other phonological skills. So this is why we really focus on foundational writing skills like drawing, labeling, and pencil grip while our students are learning their sounds at the beginning of the year. And then we really tie it in together. So we want to give them that foundation, but then we're jumping right in, a few months into kindergarten and really taking what they've learned and applying that in spelling and writing. And that connection is something that you cannot miss, especially in the younger grades. Now, here's an example of what this might look like. This is an example of a writing piece with a student who has dyslexia. So it's even more important that we're focusing on the sound correlation to the letters and how to break it down so that when they are spelling it correctly. So we are segmenting words here. We are encoding those words, and then we are using that to help with our spelling and get it onto our writing piece. This can also be used with those by heart words or red words or whatever you call it, those words that don't follow the rules, because we still want to make sure that we're mapping out those words for students, especially if they struggle with a particular word. So we are going to be bringing this in, especially at K2, to make sure that our students understand the connection between the sounds and the letters, and they're able to put that into their writing piece. So we talked about this a couple of slides ago, but I wanted to break this down for you because I want you to see what it looks like when you're connecting reading and writing through application. So instead of just applying the writing skills during reading time, we're bringing those reading skills into writing time. And in the upper grade levels especially, we're focusing on those comprehension skills. So this would look like things like summarizing text, analyzing characters, and synthesizing information from multiple sources. So these are things that should be a part of your writing block, especially in the upper grades. So an example would be text-based writing like response to literature. So in response to literature, we're analyzing characters. We are summarizing the text, using text-based evidence from reference text and informational text and opinion text. Those will also be done from multiple sources in the upper grades. And so those are just great examples of how we are furthering those reading comprehension skills during our systematic direct writing instruction. So bringing that text into writing is so important. So here's how to align your classroom with element number 3. First, relate the skills taught in reading to the writing tasks. So we're sound mapping to spell words. And then in the upper grades, we are using quality reference text for students to interact with. And we are incorporating writing tasks that require students to apply and extend their reading comprehension skills. So let's take a moment to share. So how will you connect reading and writing while still providing systematic direct instruction in both? I know I'm going to see some comments about schedules, which is a very, very common issue that we have, is trying to figure out how do we break down our literacy block to have room for both of these. Okay, I see some really great answers. Thank you all for sharing. Yes, I definitely agree that it is a struggle to fit both in, but making sure that we have that consistency is so important. Yeah, I'm sorry, I'm reading through these comments and these are great. I see some really great plans for how you're going to do this, and I'm really excited for you all. Okay, I'll give a few more minutes because I see that there's still a few people typing. Okay, so I think that this is one of the key parts, of course, with the research. But I know this is the biggest challenge, is that integration while still having the time for both. So I'm really proud of you all for sharing ways that you're going to make that happen, and hopefully make sure that it's consistent and sustainable. So thank you for sharing that. Okay, element number 4 is modeling and exemplar usage. So we found in many studies that groups that used modeling versus a control group that did not, we had the group with modeling score higher. So we're seeing this time and time again that when the teacher is modeling, the students do better. And this makes sense. I mean, just common sense. If you're learning how to do something and you're seeing an example of it being done, you're more likely to have success with it. So we have to put aside our concern about students copying and make sure that we are still heavily modeling exactly what we want them to do in their writing. So this model is going to be our cornerstone of our writing mini lesson. So that whole group, 10 to 15 minutes where you're breaking down that skill, that model is the big piece of it. You want to include any graphic organizer or any tools that you want students to use. Remember, we are using something that is going to be very simple for them to use, but also very scaffolded. And we want to make sure we're modeling it and breaking it down so that they know how to use it. And we want to direct students to apply this skill in their own writing in the same way that we modeled. So we don't want them to copy, but if they copy elements of it, that's totally fine. And if they copy all of it, that's where we're going to have opportunities built in for them to add elaborations, make revisions. A lot of times when copying happens, it's because we're not providing enough time for them to either brainstorm or have discussion and share ideas. So the more they share ideas, the more unique ideas they'll have for their writing piece. Okay, this is just a quick reminder that whatever you model should be directly applied with the students in the same way. So obviously this is a piece of writing that we have been building on, so not all one day, but students are using the exact same organizer. They are breaking it down the exact same way. They are doing the exact part that you did in your model directly after. That's super important. So let's talk about modeling and scaffolding in the early grades, because in the upper grades, we do a lot of sending our students to their desks to do their own writing after. Well, in kinder, first, and part of second grade, that's probably not going to happen. We are working on a small skill one at a time. We are doing that small skill and we're having the students apply it while we walk around to do quick check-ins. So that is something that's very unique to the younger grades because we want to make sure we're breaking it down even further into smaller chunks. And those quick check-ins are important because that's an opportunity for us to walk around while students are trying to do a word or a sentence and remind them about pencil grip, capitalization, punctuation. That would be a good opportunity to help them map a word if they're struggling to map the sounds in a word, or learn what of our by heart words they're really struggling with. And so this just gives us a lot of information and a lot of opportunities to really support our students individually. So in upper elementary and middle school, we are still doing small skills one at a time, but we are also sending our students back to work independently for longer chunks of time. So the older the kids, the more time that they can have to do independent writing. During this time, we are working with students either as a writing conference one-on-one or in small groups, and this is giving them the ability to apply what they learned during their writing. We're giving them the tools, we're giving them the example so that they can be successful during that time, so that we can focus on working with students to improve those writing skills and fill in gaps. So the great thing about modeling, in addition to our students having the exact information they need to do their writing independently, is that we also have an opportunity for natural differentiation. So when we are doing a model, we can actually plan some natural differentiation to help address things for our struggling writers, for just things our class struggles with in general. So we can actually, during our model, we can modify expectations. So we can say during our model, okay, I am writing an entire body paragraph with 5 sentences. Okay, for some of you, that's a lot to write. So you can focus on doing 3. If you get to 5 sentences and you feel like, wow, I could do more. What I want you to go back and do is go back and add an elaboration. Obviously, this is when you've already taught about elaborations, but I want you to add elaboration so that your 5 sentences are better, or you can add a 6th sentence if it makes sense in that context. So making sure that you are giving directions to your students so that you're modifying your expectations so that your struggling writers have an attainable goal and your students who are high flyers get the chance to go one step further. You can also use modeling to front load or reteach skills that your students are going to struggle with. So if you know your students struggle with using dialogue during narrative and it's been a struggle in the past, then you can also use that modeling time to really heavily focus on dialogue skills, even if it's something that your students are technically already supposed to have mastered. And then you can also use modeling to incorporate tools. So if there's a tool that you want your students to use, whether these are sentence frames for English language learners, or any graphic organizer, then that's an opportunity for you to differentiate through modeling. So another piece of feedback, this one's from Debbie, who works in an inclusion classroom. So before she was starting to use very explicit models in her classroom, she was doing well with writing, but her students were not as organized or focused as she wanted them to be. So having the mentor text and having the model sitting next to her students as they work has been very helpful because they can go back to the text and they can see what the mentor writer did and model their writing off of it. So for us, we are the ones that are modeling it and we're leaving that so that our students can utilize it. So it's not something that we're doing and we're making them copy down. It's not something that we're doing and then hiding because we don't want them to copy. It's something that is very prominently displayed and we're encouraging them to go look at and to use. Okay, let's talk about exemplars and how they fit into this research and ways that we should use them and ways that we shouldn't use them. So first of all, these examples, there's one from first and two from fifth. So you can kind of see some examples here. And they do have so many uses. You know, we can use them for analyzing a completed piece to look for important elements, especially for teaching our older students what the expectations are, and we're showing them a student-friendly rubric. We can use them to practice providing quality feedback, especially with our first graders. Something like this is really a great way to introduce feedback. We can show them how to revise to improve the quality of their finished piece. Even our younger kids love to provide feedback and help you fix or make better these exemplars. So I really love using them with the younger grade levels too. And then they can just overall provide a complete example of the finished writing piece so that your students have a comparison to know if they've written in the right organization, if they've written enough, if they provided all the elements. So these are very, very helpful. Now, a lot of times people use student exemplars, and these can be used in a positive way with some students. There are some students who love having their writing featured. They have the elements that you're looking for, and so they can be used as good exemplars. However, for some students, this can stress them out, especially if you're providing feedback on it and they're feeling like they're being attacked. So we want to use it sparingly for those students. I personally like to have my exemplars already done because I want to show my students exactly certain elements or a lack of certain elements. So I like to have these pre-planned so that they're getting the takeaways that I need them to get from this. So having a teacher create exemplars for the different levels is preferable, but I know it's a lot of work. I am going to give you some exemplars at the end along with your unit. So that's something that you do not want to miss because that will save you a lot of time with that unit. So here's how you can align this element to your classroom. So first of all, plan your systematic unit with a model for each part of the process. Then make sure that anything students do with their writing is modeled right before it. So anything that they need to do needs to be modeled. Any graphic organizers or tools, same thing. And then we want to use exemplars throughout the writing piece to show great examples of work to help teach revision. Any purpose that you can use to bring in these exemplars can be very powerful. Okay, give me an example in the chat of a time someone modeled something for you that helped you learn something new. This is my favorite question of the whole training because I feel like I'm getting so many fun answers. Things from like gardening to knitting to like really bizarre things. So I'm really excited to see what you all share. If you have something extra weird that you learned how to do, please share that one because it gives me joy. All right, I'll give you guys a couple moments to respond. Great. Okay. I'm not seeing anything super weird, but I do see some very unique experiences. Overall, what I can tell from you all is that every single one of you has had a situation where someone has modeled something and it helped you learn something new. Keep this in mind as you are teaching your lessons, and especially if you get that little voice in your head that's like, if I model it too much, my students are going to copy me. Or if anyone tells you that, because we know everyone has an opinion, keep this experience in mind. Like, copying is the way that we learn. And then we put our own spin on it. We learn more about it. We do our own research. But I'm loving these examples. So thank you all for sharing. So element number 5 is the one that teachers struggle with the most. And that's because building in feedback can seem very, very difficult, especially when we're talking about meeting with students one-on-one. However, consistent and timely feedback is really the big difference between your students continuing to make the same mistakes over and over again and actually learning to make those corrections quickly. So a lot of times when we don't have timely feedback, our students are having to go back and make corrections, and then that they're not making that connection in their brain of when they're actually in that part of the writing process that they need to make that quick correction. So it it doesn't really work as well if we are conferring with them, a week later and having them go back to something that they did the last week, when it's better if we can catch it quickly. That doesn't mean that writing conferences are not important. It doesn't mean that we shouldn't give feedback that on past writing. It just means that the best feedback is timely, and that they need to consistently get feedback as well. So feedback does not just have to be from the teacher. It is not just one-on-one writing conferences. Feedback is everything from quick check-ins, peer feedback, group feedback, one-on-one conferring, any situation where students are getting even just a quick correction. That is feedback. Now, of course, this varies quite a bit on what you'll do on each part of the writing process. Quick checks are going to be something that you're going to see all the time. You're going to really try to get implemented all the time whenever you can, especially in K2. Whereas group feedback might be a little less common. Conferring is a little less common because you have to meet with every student. Peer feedback, something that can be built in pretty often. And you may also be building in feedback opportunities in your writing block so that you're providing direct instruction on how to do that. So there's lots of different options here. As long as you are really focusing on this during your writing block and making sure that it's happening, you're going to have some more success with your students. So here's an example of what a quick check-in could look like. So you walk around the room, you see this writing piece, you're towards the end. You see this, of course, you can see that there are a lot of issues here, right? And I don't want to say issues, right? Because this is a developing writer. This is very normal. But there are a lot of things that you could correct. You could sit there and work on letter formation for multiple letters. There's just a lot there. The great thing is that the formatting looks pretty good. It's a letter. But we want to make sure that when you're doing quick check-ins where you're walking around and you're just really looking at what students are doing, you're focusing on what they're actively doing and making any quick correction that you see there. So you don't want to be really looking for every single mistake that you see and sitting down to help them correct that. This could be something like noticing that they're not putting punctuation and just stopping to say, okay, let's look at your first sentence. Can you read it back to me? Okay, great. Now where that ended, you need to put punctuation. Which punctuation mark works in this situation? All right, great job. Okay, what I want you to do is I want you to add punctuation and do the same thing for the rest of the sentences, and then you walk away. So quick 2 minutes, not anything where you're really taking a whole lot of time. Now, in K2, we know we don't have a dedicated student writing time where they're working independently or we're pulling small groups. It's not really something we normally do because we're doing more of these quick check-ins so that they're getting instant feedback. And when you look at the quick check-ins for the upper grades, this is something that you can still do, but a lot of times what we're doing with the upper grades during that quick check-in time is writing down and keeping track of what skills they are struggling with so that we can pull them into small group quickly, whether it's the next day or the day after, and work on that skill and continue to apply that in their writing piece. So quick check-ins can be used as an assessment tool, or it can be used to make those corrections and provide that feedback. So both of those are very, very helpful. Okay, let's talk about peer and group feedback, because this is a great opportunity at any grade level for us to teach our students how to give feedback while we are there to scaffold. So this could be in a small group with us as a teacher, or it could be in students in pods. But what we want to do is we want to first directly teach them how to do it. So we're not just having some open-ended feedback session. We want to sit down and teach a lesson with our students, introducing feedback, looking at what quality feedback looks like, modeling how to give and receive feedback. This example is from the upper elementary grades. But if you're talking about K2, when it comes to showing them how to give feedback, a lot of that feedback is going to be very oral. So you're going to be modeling having conversations. And we're going to practice, right? And then we can go off and we can do the same thing in our pods or small groups. And that is an opportunity for us to put an emphasis on feedback while having it come from their peers and not just us all the time. Not only is it a time saver for us and allows for more timely and consistent feedback, because the students are providing that to each other, but it teaches them about how to give and receive feedback, which is a really important skill. Okay, we have conferring. This, if you want to include this, make sure you create a focused conference time. I'm probably the only person who does professional development on writing who doesn't have a focus on writing conferences, and that's because I know that in some situations they work really well and in some they don't, and I've experienced this over the years. And there's no judgment from me if this is something that doesn't work for you. As long as you are providing feedback in some way to your students and it's consistent and timely, it's okay if you don't do one-on-one conferences. At one point, I had a class of 36 students, and so for me, this was a big challenge, and so I had to get creative, and so we were doing a lot more group feedback and also small group interventions instead of writing conferences, and that's totally fine. So if you are doing writing conferences, just make sure that you have that focused conference time so it's consistent, and that instead of focusing on reading the student's entire piece and giving them feedback on that, you are having them pose questions to you that they want you to review. So part of the writing piece that they feel like is weak or they have questions about, so that you can focus on that one piece. You want your students to learn how to identify where they need help, which is not, we know, is more difficult with some students than others, but it's something that we're working on, because if they can come to us saying, this is the spot where I'm struggling, here is the help that I need, and pose a question to you, they can do that with their peers as well, and they can get quick feedback that way. So it's a very important skill. We also want to make sure that we end with a single action item. So instead of circling all the errors and the action item is to go back and fix all of those, we're really focusing on one thing. And the reason for this is that if we just have our students fix all their errors, one, they're not really learning why those errors are happening. Two, they're getting overwhelmed. And three, they're often feeling like they're bad writers because there's so much to correct. So we don't want any of that to happen. So during conferences, do not have students read their entire writing piece out loud. You do not have time for that. Do ask students to identify one thing they need support with. Do not mark every single error. Instead, look for a recurring error to focus on if they don't have something in particular that they want help with. Now, if they do express that they want help with something and you don't see it as a huge problem, you can say, you know what, I know you asked for help on this, but I do notice this one thing that we should probably work on first, okay? Do not do all the talking. You want your student to be the one that's directing it. They're the one that's asking for help. And then you are scaffolding and having them be a part of that discussion. So you also do not want to let students leave empty-handed. So you want to either provide a tool that they can use to support the revision process, or have something written on their paper that they can take back and then use to revise. Because they're not just working on this with you. When they go back to their seat, they are focusing on revision or editing, and they're making those changes that you talked about. So they are applying that in their work. And don't try to keep track mentally of what you met about. Especially if you're not meeting very often because you have large class sizes and a short amount of time, you want to record any notes from your session and especially on your student growth, record that, whether it's just like a Google Doc spreadsheet or if you have something on paper. You want to keep track of what you were working on, and then when you get to grade that writing piece, if you see that reflected, they've reflected that skill, they've improved upon that skill, that is amazing, because not only can you use that growth to reflect in their grades, but that's something that you can tell them, hey, we worked on this last time and I noticed you applied it in your writing. You know, that you're doing amazing. So that can increase their motivation and their self-worth feeling as good writers. So you want to make sure we keep track of that growth, especially for our kiddos who are really far behind and they feel like they need to be caught up, but they're not going to be caught up to grade level, but they are improving. So we need to keep track of how they are improving. So when you give feedback, whether it's in a small group or at writing conferences or as a quick check-in, you want to make sure that feedback is actionable. So here's an example. Let's say you have a student who comes back to you and they are writing a resolution that wraps up the story, and they're telling you, like, this is really hard. I'm really having a hard time with my resolution. So what we're going to do with them, we read through the resolution, we realize, yes, they're missing that wrap up. We're just not really getting what we need from it. So the strategy that I'm going to have the student do is write 2 to 3 character actions or events that explains what happens to them at the end of the story. We're just going to brainstorm those events. And then we're going to talk about it and make sure, okay, those events really do wrap up the story. And then the action item is they're going to take the actions or events and they're going to use them to rewrite the end of the story. They're going to include their dialogue if they need to. They're going to make sure that it's all organized properly in order. And so there is an action item there. You can use feedback to set individualized goals as well. And actually, self-reflection is a form of feedback. They're giving themselves feedback, so that's great as well. I always like to use feedback and individualized goals just in general because it allows for more equitable grading. So when our students are setting goals and meeting goals and I'm keeping track of them, I can see that they're improving, so I can give them that credit, especially if you're using skill-based grading. And then it just makes progress more attainable and motivates students, like we said. Seeing that they're making growth, especially for kiddos like my son who has dyslexia, and it feels like in comparison to his even his sister in his class or his friends, that he's just not where they are. But seeing that he's set goals and he's meeting those goals and making improvement, that is a big deal to him. That is what makes him thrive. So it's really important that we make sure that our students know what their goals are when they've met those goals and they're seeing their progress. So here's how to align your classroom. So plan consistent, timely opportunities for feedback during writing time. Try to include as many natural opportunities as you can because we know time is an issue. But also make sure you plan some time to really directly teach about it so that your students know how to provide and ask for quality feedback. And ensure that students use feedback to take immediate action. That's the most important part. We need to have that purpose for that feedback. And just like when we teach our kids during our lessons, when we teach them during feedback, we want to make sure it's an actionable item that they're then putting in their writing. Okay, so let's take a moment to share. So tell me, what opportunity for feedback can you add to your writing block that doesn't take a lot of extra time or effort? So it's going to be very different based off of grade level, number of students in your class, just your situation in general. Do you have English language learners? Do you have a high number of special education students? Are you in an inclusion classroom? These are all things that we need to think about, and the type of feedback and how often we do it and everything really depends on these. So there's no right answer here. Anything that you put is really exciting to me because I love seeing that you were going to build in something. Okay, I already see a lot of people talking about the quick check-ins, and I know we have a lot of kinder and first grade teachers in here. And when it comes to writing and everything really, but especially with writing, the best observations I've done with teachers who are teaching direct systematic lessons on writing to kinder and first graders, they walk around and make those quick checks, those quick corrections. I see a lot of growth from those students. Okay, so that's awesome. I'm very glad to hear that. I see a couple people talking about the peer feedback station. So if you have been to my engagement, I have an engagement training and a differentiation training. And I've done those in the past. I've done some at conferences. So I always try to share. This is probably the first one where I'm really not sharing that peer feedback station. But that's a great opportunity to basically just have a place for kids who are finished early or stuck to connect with each other and give and receive feedback so that they can then continue in their writing. More of an independent thing for the uppers grades. So I was excited to see that. And then it looks like a lot of people are sharing that they're going to be doing group peer feedback, which is great. It's once your kids get really good at feedback, even in the kindergarten level, and the first grade level, I've seen just amazing feedback. Yeah, that's great. Okay, sorry, I'm just reading through the comments. I always feel like I'm so awkward when I'm trying to read through them and talk at the same time. Okay, thank you all for sharing. Okay, so we've made it through the meat of the training as far as what the research says and how to align your classroom to that. And so I just want to spend the rest of this time before we get to the Q&A talking about some of the challenges that you are experiencing, because I know that all of this sounds amazing and you want to do it, but there are some challenges and I want to make sure that we address those first, and I want to make sure that you feel seen and heard. So we're going to talk about that. Then we'll talk about what we can do to align our classroom, make it simple, make this work, and answer a lot of questions for you all. And I'm going to give you your free resources. So we're getting closer to the end. I know some of you are probably antsy like me, so you could take a moment to get up and stretch, move around a little bit, and then we're going to get straight back into this. So thank you for being patient and for sitting through this so far. Okay, so let's talk about your challenges. So this is not all challenges. You may have one that's not on this list, but we have some common challenges that we're overcoming in order to really implement the research. And the first and biggest one is the lack of time for systematic writing instruction. So this is something that I focus a lot of training around because it is really important to carve out that time. We also talk about like how long to do it and so forth, how often and consistency. So I'm not going to go into that, but I am going to say that it's very important just to make sure that you've carved out consistent time for systematic writing instruction. It has to happen. I know that's easier said than done, but if you cannot make it work, reach out to me, tell me what your schedule looks like and some ideas. We can bounce ideas off each other because every classroom is so unique. I can't really provide an exact way to do it. But I do understand that it's a challenge. I found it as a challenge as well, especially when I was departmentalized teaching both reading and writing in a 15-minute block. So I understand those challenges and I'm really happy to talk to you all and try to make that work. The next challenge that I see very often is overwhelm and burnout for both teachers and students. So, we know that writing is a lot of work to plan, a lot of work to grade, a lot of work to do, and it can be exhausting. So we want to make sure that whatever we are putting in place for our writing instruction is very sustainable. So we don't want to be adding any elements that are going to make this be extra work, or we just want to stick to these 5 key things that we talked about, okay? I see a lot of teachers who try to add extra like fun activities they've seen on Pinterest. They try to add some sort of like system that's really complex when it comes to the writing block, and that just creates overwhelm. So stick with the basics, stick with the research, and most importantly, just make sure that direct systematic instruction is in place. And then the writing skill gaps tends to be a challenge that we have. We have students who are missing all sorts of writing skills. We have students that are hesitant to write. They are behind in writing. A lot of times it does relate to their reading skills. And so that's a lot for us to address. So that's why it's so important for us to make sure that we have a system in place to track those gaps and try to fill in those gaps, whether it's through whole group mini lessons, small group lessons, or a one-on-one work time. And then another challenge that I get all the time is that we have a lot of ELA curriculum that includes writing. It says it includes writing, but it lacks direct systematic lessons. So last year, I was honored to be invited to be on our ELA curriculum committee for the school district that my students attend. So, and I work a lot with their district office and they know me really well. And, it was a good fit because obviously I have a lot of knowledge around ELA. One of the things that I found to be very frustrating during that process, because we reviewed many different programs, was that they all said they included writing, but it was all over the place. There was one in particular, and luckily this is one that was not on any of the teachers' lists because all the teachers are looking for writing as a part of that literacy block. But there was one that said writing was included, and it was only a question at the end of each. It was a couple questions at the end of each reading unit or reading lesson that had students respond to the text. So no direct instruction. I've seen some that have direct instruction, but it's very scattered here and there. It's all kind of all over the place. And so really when we're evaluating curriculum, we want to make sure that we have direct systematic instruction. And like what I showed earlier, it has to break down the writing process into those small skills. So if we're not teaching writing consistently, if it's all over the place or it's application of writing, that's not good. So that's a big struggle and a big reason why we have so many gaps in our students' writing skills. And so it's just something that we always need to keep in mind. And then the last one has been a new one that we've been struggling with recently. And this was actually an issue in my husband's district because they had purchased a digital writing program or digital writing tool that was marketed as a teaching tool, but didn't have direct lessons. So it really essentially was marketed as a program, but it was really just a tool. So we want to make sure that, if we are using technology for writing, that's great. There are some great ones out there, but if it's a tool, we still need to have that direct instruction. So these are all challenges that we see. And I know there's many, many more. And I can definitely appreciate the fact that you're trying to juggle a lot. So I appreciate the fact that you're here and that you want to do what's right for your students and you are really interested in this topic. So again, I know I've thanked you many, many times, but I really am thankful for your commitment. Okay, let's share what can you do in your classroom to overcome these challenges and help support your writers. So you don't have to address every single challenge. Just think about the one that you find to be the most difficult for you. I know for a lot of you, it's going to be time. So take that challenge and I want you to brainstorm what are some ways that you can overcome this struggle. Because if you overcome your biggest struggle with writing instruction, that will open you up to being able to really follow the research and provide the lessons that your students need. Yes, my prediction was definitely right. And I know it's not necessarily a prediction because I've seen this time and time again in trainings, but time is the issue. And I do see a couple people have already responded that they're going to carve out that time for writing. So, and I do see a couple people asking about how to overcome that, what to do. So I don't want to go too much into it because it's not a part of this training. It's not something we're going to depth in this training. But when it comes to planning consistent writing lessons, 4 times a week, 30 minutes is fine. 5 days a week, 30 minutes, preferable. 35, 40 minutes can be great. With your younger kids, K2, 30 minutes is plenty because you're doing very small skill lessons. Okay, thank you all for sharing. I really appreciate you all being so open and honest about these challenges because I know it's hard to talk about what we struggle with, but it's also good to see that we're not the only ones that struggle with this. I have been teaching and coaching and doing all of these things. I wrote a book about writing, but I still learn new things every day. I'm still researching. I'm still in Facebook groups, seeing what all the new things are, talking to teachers about things. So I still feel like I have my own challenges and I am still learning. I'm a lifelong learner, as you all are. So I appreciate how open you guys are being about your struggles. And I'm really just glad that you all are here. I love the fact that we are able to do this, to be able to collaborate online, share our challenges, and try to make a plan. Okay, so here's how I can help. I work with over 10,000 teachers and many schools and districts, and I can help you create a sustainable schedule with only 30 to 40 minutes a day. So it can happen. I know 30 minutes and daily is a lot, especially for our middle school or departmentalized teachers. So I promise I have more information on how to make that work. And I can work one-on-one with you to come up with a sustainable schedule. So don't feel like if you haven't seen your type of schedule reflected that it can't happen. I promise I'm here to support you. I can provide the direct systematic lessons so that you are no longer overwhelmed and that your students are excited about writing. And I can train you how to fill in writing gaps using simple modifications and interventions and give you the materials for that. So the way that I can do this is through the Simplify Writing program, which is a program that I created with some other amazing educators to not only train teachers and school leaders on how to put the research into place and make that focus on writing really happen in a sustainable and systematic way, but also to have the materials that you need to do this. So Simplify Writing program is a very unique program because we include everything you could possibly need for a very affordable price. We sell to both schools and districts and also teachers. And because we know there are many teachers who want to make this change in the classroom, but getting your school on board or getting purchase orders or school funding is just really not there. So this is a very unique program for another reason, which is that we have differentiation tools, which I'm going to go over in a moment. The 3 parts of it are the training, the full writing system, so you have your systematic writing lessons for every single day, and the differentiation tools, which is that last piece that I think most programs lack. And we know that there's no one-size-fits-all approach for one classroom. And handing a curriculum to a teacher and saying, teach this to fidelity, don't make any modifications based on your students' needs, is really not going to work for our below grade level students or even our above grade level students. So inside of the course that comes with the program, it's self-paced, which is fantastic because that means you don't have to have a professional development day. You don't have to worry about just getting the training and then it's done and you can't access it anymore. You can come back and you can view modules over and over again. You can pick and choose them and get whatever you need to get help in specific areas. We do recommend that anybody who uses the program takes the course first. And the courses are different depending on the level because we have a lot of different elements in K2 versus 3rd through 8th grade. But our course does help you first build your writing block so that we have natural and easy differentiation involved while still dealing with some of those time constraints. I teach you how to learn how to support your special education students, your English language learners, and your gifted students. And then I show you also how to make actionable feedback possible even with the short writing block. So this is a very quick summary of this. There is so much in there, but it really is a systematic way for you to tackle your writing instruction and get all of the things in place. The best part of it is that when you take the course, you know that you don't have to go out and create all of these lessons yourself. Everything that we tell you, we have provided you that resource. So it's all there. You don't have to go to any outside source. We have 3 different programs. We group these together for teachers who are buying a personal license because we know many of you teach multiple grade levels or you switch grade levels and we don't want you to have to pay any extra. So we do group these together for personal licenses, but for districts, we normally do single grade levels unless you are a teacher, of course, who teaches multiple grade levels. So just a quick overview of our programs and what's included in these for the core lessons. So for K through 2, we do start with foundational lessons that set that foundation for writing in kindergarten. And then we do that as well in 1st and 2nd grade to review some of those skills and make sure that foundation is there before we move into those core lessons. We, of course, do narrative, opinion, explanatory, informational with the science and social studies focus, and we also do a literature-based opinion as well. So we are incorporating the other subject areas like we want to do and then setting that foundation for our students. So here's just some materials that are pictured. We do provide rubrics and everything as well as very specific models and systematic direct instruction for each day for our students. Our 3rd through 5th grade, very much set up in the same way, except that we don't have the foundational units. We start straight off with personal narrative. Within that personal narrative, we are teaching some of those foundational skills. And we, of course, also do informational, text-based opinion, literature analysis, and narrative. Okay, and then these are some of the materials from our 3rd through 5th grade programs. And I want to also let you know too, because there could be some confusion here. We have it by grade level. It's not one program for 3rd through 5th. It just includes 3rd, 4th, and 5th grade. One of the great things about 3rd through 8th grade is we do include the student organizers as digital organizers. We don't do that for kinder and first grade in particular because our students really need to be focusing on their pencil grip, letter formation. All of these things need to happen on paper and pencil for those kids. So we do have the digital versions in the upper grades. 6th through 8th looks very similar. We do have literature analysis and argumentative, which is research-based, as well as still having our informational for science and social studies and having poetry analysis as well. Again, it's 6th, 7th, and 8th grade, and each sequence is going to be a little bit different, but these are all included in those 3 grade levels. So each unit, no matter what grade level it is, has simple differentiation techniques built in so that you can help reach all your levels of writers. So the graphic organizers are built in, the modeling is built in, all of these research-based practices are built in. We give you everything that you possibly can need, from teacher directions to your example to your students' pages. We provide all of that so that you don't have to worry about any extra planning when it comes to providing your direct systematic lessons. And then most importantly, we make sure that the lessons and examples are ones that your students can relate to. So this is an example from 3rd through 5th grade, looking at what we include. Of course, obviously it's not just 3 pages, but this is the mentor text, which is very key. This is where the teacher is modeling different elements. So this is a model for a specific day. A lesson plan, so you'll see that step-by-step organizer with our learning goals and our standards. We do put Common Core coding on there because a lot of states use Common Core still, but the writing standards are very consistent across states. So even if you're not a Common Core state, you won't have any issues with that alignment. And it is completely editable, so if you do need to turn in lesson plans, you can always swap out the standards. And then we include all the student pages. Some of these pages do need to be printed or shared digitally in the older grades because they are more complex organizers with examples, but a lot of them can be copied down as well to save paper. On the back of the lesson plans, we also have a script in case you need help knowing what to say during your lesson and what examples to give to go along with our mentor text. It's also a great thing to give to a substitute. We also include rubrics and exemplars with every lesson. We talked about exemplars in this training. It's so important, as well as having a rubric to set that expectation for your students. Okay, now this is where our program becomes very different from other programs. We have a library of fantastic differentiation tools, and inside of our course, we show you exactly how to use these tools to make modifications for your students. We teach you how to use these in small group to address learning gaps that only a few students have in your class. We also teach you how to take intervention materials and use those if your students need reteach or they need you to front load a skill that they should have already mastered but haven't. And what's even better is that we show you exactly how to get that data at the beginning of the year. So how to figure out who's missing what and make a plan of action to help fill in those gaps. The grammar library is used in this way too, so we provide multiple levels of grammar skills in case you have a small group of students or your entire class who needs extra help with this skill. Our most popular one is fragments and run-ons because even though that's a skill that's not usually taught in some of the upper grades, it's something that our kids continue to struggle with. So we provide that in there. Even if you're an 8th grade teacher and you notice that you're having a lot of trouble with that, then you can have that lesson to focus on. And most importantly, in our grammar library and our course, we train you on how to teach these lessons in context. So this is not meant to be completely taught in isolation. We want to follow the research, so we're going to be using lessons that we can then apply to our writing. So that's something you'll learn in there as well. We also have some fun spiral daily grammar practices. If you have a warm-up time for your class and you just want your kids to get a little extra grammar practice, it doesn't hurt. And then our last library is our ELL support library. Inside of this, we have a video training for each resource that you can use to help support your English language learners. Now, each of these, it might look different depending on what level you have, but everything that's included in here is a support tool that you can use to help support these students while you're doing your on-grade level lessons. And lastly, if you have any problems at all, you are in a situation or you have a student that you just can't figure out, we are here to help. So unlike a big curriculum company where you just have contact with salespeople or customer service people who maybe aren't trained teachers, we're a very small staff. All of us are very passionate about writing instruction. We have a lot of teaching experience. We've been in your shoes very recently, and we're here to help support you, whether that's one-on-one coaching via email or just having someone to vent to. So we are here to answer your questions anytime. We are so happy to talk to you, to get your feedback, to see what else you need from the program. If we find something that would really benefit our teachers, we are always adding things. So we actually just revamped our course to incorporate a couple of key items that teachers felt they needed more training in. So we're always here and listening so that we can make this the best program for you and your students. And yes, we do take purchase orders. We prefer purchase orders because that means that the teacher is not having to pay for it. So we are here to make that process very simple for you. So if you prefer to try to get it funded through your school or you want to get your whole school on board, we are here to help walk you through that process. So our school purchases are a little bit different. I know someone always asks about that during the Q&A, so I'm sure I'll be answering that then. But it's a little bit different of a pricing structure because we're getting multiple teachers that use the licenses. So it is a little different. So all of the pricing I'm going to talk about right now is for our personal licenses. Now this is if a teacher is purchasing this for their personal use, not with school funds, because if you leave a school, you take the program with you. So we do lifetime licenses. So once you purchase with us, then you own whatever you purchased for the lifetime of the program. So if you are interested and you know that you're not going to get school funding and you just want to commit to making this happen in your classroom, but you don't want to put all the time and effort into trying to create things on your own and really wrap your head around this, this is a fantastic deal. You can get started for $27. It is not a membership. It is a payment plan. I am very anti-membership. I'm not a fan. I just already have too many memberships as it is. So there's 2 payment options, and this is going to be for each program. So if you buy a program on a personal license, you get access to 3 grade levels. So you either get K2, 3, 5, or middle school, which is 6, 8. So that's beneficial for you because then if you switch grade levels within your band, you don't have to pay any extra. If you do go from kindergarten to 5th grade for some reason, we have a very big discount for members so that you can get those extra materials. We try to do our best to make this really reasonable for teachers and for schools. So with the payment plan, once you pay 10 payments of $27, you're completely paid up. You own that program. It's a little bit more than the one-time fee because we have to pay fees to the credit card company. So it's a little bit extra over time. If you do one payment, you save $23 since we don't have to pay those extra fees for each transaction. You get access to everything no matter what you choose. We don't want to hold anything back just because you're on a payment plan. So you get access to the full course, which is an 8-hour course. And I have not seen a quality course on writing instruction that has been under $1,000 recently. So I know that we're keeping this a really good deal for you. You get the entire lesson library. So every single day's explicit direct instruction for the entire year for 3 grade levels. The grammar intervention libraries, and we train you on how to use those. Access to any future updates and additions to the level that you own. So if we come up with another intervention resource, we come up with another tool, it's going to be in your dashboard. Community and email support whenever you need it. And then priority access to any new professional development opportunities. So I just want you to think if you paid $27 today, you'll be able to implement the best practices from this training without extra time or effort. So we have a lot of data on our website and you can view it. Just my favorite one that I love to look at over and over again is that we found that 90% of students showed as much or more growth than the teacher expected. So of course, the expectations are going to be different for every teacher, but 90% of teachers reported that they found as much or more growth using a program with their students. Okay, we have some feedback here. This is a piece of feedback we got from a 1st grade teacher who actually had her school purchase for her. So she had a real big range of students from those completely new to English and those who have been reading and writing for years and can write independently. So we all experience this. And so this has really helped her be able to help meet the needs of all of her students because of the differentiation tools while still teaching in a whole group setting. This is a piece of feedback from Catherine, who works with second language learners. So her students have been able to do more with our writing curriculum than any other curriculum that her district has purchased. So Catherine actually purchased this on her own, made that dedication to her classroom, and started implementing it without her district purchasing. And then we have Megan, who's a middle school special education teacher. And she, of course, also has a lot of varying ability levels. So she likes that the program breaks everything down into manageable pieces. Her students are happy to do it. They're not groaning about writing anymore. And she's been really impressed with the ideas that her students are coming up with. So this is fantastic. We get a lot of social media messages, emails all the time praising the program, because we know we put our heart and soul into it. And as teachers, we know what you all are dealing with, what challenges you're dealing with, and we have worked really hard to solve those challenges for you, as well as put what we knew about the research into this program to make sure it has everything to help your students be successful and the training that you need to be successful as well. Okay, I have a special bonus for you all because I love to give things away. If you decide to join Simplify Writing by the end of the training, you'll get access to $250 in supplemental reading resources for your grade level band. So we have a lot of reading resources that we've made for things like Teachers Pay Teachers and developed for other programs. And we thought, what if we just give these to teachers who decide that they want to join on the training? We've had a lot of writing members ask us about it before we started doing this, and we just thought this would be a really fun idea. So if you make that commitment, you will get access to this as a big bonus. So this is, of course, more than the value of the writing program completely. So it's a great bonus. It looks a little different depending on the grade level band. So our K2 one is actually still being developed because that is the last writing program we created. So our bonus for reading includes things like bulletin boards, by heart words, activities, phoneme cards, centers, and much more. We're working on some core phonics lessons. It's going to be great. So we have a lot of really good things in there for kinder, first grade, and a ton for second grade already. But we're building out a lot more for K1. So if you do join for kinder through second grade, keep an eye on this bonus. It's going to keep growing over the next year. We also have this bonus for upper elementary, which is 3rd through 5th grade. We have so much in there because I primarily had started creating supplemental resources for 3rd through 5th grade when I was still just coaching on writing. So we have things like an entire year of literacy centers. We have reading comprehension assessments. We have flipbook and interactive notebook read aloud units for every reading standard. So you can make those standards a lot more fun. And then similarly, middle school has reading comprehension assessments and then has standard-based units for literature and informational text, as well as ELA word walls and activity pages. So there's just a ton of resources to comb through in here. I have a lot of people ask, is this Simplify Reading? And the answer is no, we don't have a reading program. These are all supplemental materials for you to just pick and choose whatever you need. Hopefully it will save you a lot going to other websites to purchase things that you need as supplementals if you're able to use them, because they'll be available in there. Okay, so we are ready for our Q&A. If you asked a question during the presentation, please post it again so that I can see it. So I don't have to scroll. We have a lot of questions and comments, so I'm very worried I'm going to miss something. If I do miss your question or comment, I really apologize. The chat is quite crazy on my end, so please give me some grace. I really appreciate that. My email box is completely open if you have any questions at all. Email help@simplifywriting.com, and if I missed your question or you just want to share a private question you don't want to ask in the chat, I'll make sure to get back to you, okay? So if you asked your question and I didn't answer it, don't worry, I'm here. Okay, so I'm going to kind of go through and see some common questions so I can answer those, because I want to wrap this up quickly because we went a little over our time. And I just do want to remind you that once the Q&A is over there, you cannot get access to the reading bonus. So if you are excited and you can't wait to get started and you want to get that bonus, now is the time to check that out. It is linked in the red square. And then the free resources for attending, If you want to try out the first full unit for free that is aligned to the research, you can find that in the blue box. So it does not include, of course, the training, the differentiation materials. It's just a core unit, but it's a really good way to get started. I do highly, highly recommend, though, that you check out the whole program at the $27 a month payment plan, because, of course, there is a 14-day money-back guarantee. So if the program's not it for you, you can always email us and we will refund that transaction and cancel your payment plan. So if you are really all in, instead of going for the free resources, I would start with the $27 payment plan. That way you can see the whole scope of the program. Okay, I already see someone asking about district licenses or school licenses and getting the reading bonus. So do not worry if you are in here and you are interested in getting your school to pay for it and you think there's a good chance of that. There's a couple options. First thing you can do is you can do the payment plan if you want to, and then once your school pays for it, we will refund you all of your payments. So we always do that. You just have to let us know, because sometimes we don't know you have an account. So just send us a reminder once your school assigns you a license. And then you can still get the bonuses, then you can still start with your program while you're still waiting, because the purchase order process sometimes can take up to 3 months. And then the other option would be to let us know in the chat, you're interested in having that, you're interested. And then once your school purchases and assigns you a license, email us and say, hey, I was on this training on this date. Can you please add the bonus reading resources? We don't want to take those from you because your school paid for it. We do want to offer them to you as a bonus, though, to get you inside. And that's because we know this is going to make a difference in your classroom. Okay, so questions. I see a lot of other questions about purchase orders. I feel like we've been very lucky recently that we've had a lot of schools come on board, and there seems to have been some good funding. So I'm really happy to answer those questions. We have Sherry is our go-to person for purchase orders. If you email her, she can answer all your questions. help@simplifywriting.com. But the basics of our licensing for schools is that we do our license per classroom teacher, just like our personal licenses, but we have a 1-year term or a 3-year term, and the 3-year term is heavily discounted. So we can provide a quote for both of those. There's a lot of turnover, a lot of account management, onboarding new teachers, training. We also we do an onboarding meeting with the school as well. So there's a lot of extra there. But the licensing price for that year is the same price as the personal license. So it's still a very, very good deal, and definitely cheaper than any other curriculum you're going to find. And you don't have to buy extra trainings or anything to use it, because we include everything in there. So please do reach out to us. We are here to help you if your school is interested. We can also meet. We can also participate if you would like to pilot the program. So we have had a lot of that recently. We've had a lot of curriculum committees that we've gone through, and we can, of course, sit in on one of those to present it to you as well if you're interested in that. Okay, I see a couple questions about the research. So one person is asking about the research documents. So not all of the research that we mentioned in here, but my favorite summaries of this research, because there's so much on it, can be found if you look at the training materials in the blue box. I'm losing my mind here. I'm definitely tired. Then you'll see the link for where your certificate is going to be and your free month of lessons. I also put the research there as well. You can also go to simplifywriting.com/research. So you'll be able to click, there's an ESSA document on there that includes the evidence for our program, but it also includes the studies that we use to gather this research. On that page, towards like the middle, you'll also see the elements that we talked about with a couple of differences, and also the studies cited underneath them. And these are just the studies that we thought that were the most thorough, because there are many, many, many studies, especially for things like graphic organizers. There's so many. So although we reviewed many, many studies, we chose the ones that we felt like were the best put together and had the best information for teachers. So you can find the research there. I'm also going to send it out in an email right after this. I set it out to go out automated to make sure that you had it. So you might actually have it in your inbox already. so that you knew how to find the research that we talked about. I just didn't want to clutter up the slides with a lot of different citations and everything, but you can find that all there. Okay, I saw someone who's on here who is already a member and was asking about the reading bonus. Just email us. Let us know you're in the training. You're already a member. We'd be happy to add it to your account if you don't already have it. We often do get members who aren't on trainings with us. And a lot of times we do this bonus on our trainings because I feel like it is important to give something away for making that commitment. So I'm really happy to provide that to you as well. Okay, let me scroll through a little bit. I don't want to miss anything, but I see a lot of repeated questions and some really sweet comments. So thank you if you left me a kind comment. I really appreciate it. Okay, I see a really good question about what to do if you teach a multi-grade class. So let's say you have first and second grade. Obviously, that's a challenge. Things are very different at those levels compared to like fourth and fifth grade, where a lot of times the standards are very similar and you can either teach the fourth grade lessons if your students are on the lower end, or the fifth grade lessons if they're on the higher end, and then use our differentiation tools to make that work. If you're looking at something like kinder versus first grade, you may want to group your students and teach two different lessons, but you can also use the lessons that we provide for a whole group if you feel like your students have the foundations, or let's say your first graders don't have the foundations and they need those kindergarten tools, that can totally be done. So at the lower grades, it really depends on the classes. So if you do have a multi-grade class, please, and you're teaching just one unit, please email us and give us specifics so that I can give you a recommendation. But if it's an upper level multi-grade class, it's usually not a huge deal to use one of the grade levels and then make those modifications that we train you how to use for your students, because we know our students are at varying ability levels, whether or not they're all third graders or some are second and some are third. So we're here to support you and give you more specific examples. So if you can tell us your situation, I know not all of you quite know that situation yet. So it's something we can revisit too when you're ready to talk about, if once you really get to know your students and what they need. So just email me so we can make sure we get you that information correctly and we give you a good answer. I also see a couple questions from teachers who are special education teachers asking what level to get. So in our middle school special education, we've had teachers do both, either the special education program, we don't have a special education program. We have tools for that, but both our middle school program and our upper elementary. I personally prefer that you stick with the grade level band that you teach because we want those topics to be at that level. We want our students to not feel like they're getting something that's too baby for them, but is on their level. So the way that we do this is by using on grade level lessons, but using those differentiation tools like your intervention units. A lot of our special education teachers primarily use the intervention units, and then they tie that into a very expanded version of a unit to make sure that they're taking things very slowly so that their students can access it. And also modifying expectations helps a lot. So with our middle school teachers, for example, who are using like a sixth grade curriculum with special education students who are at a second or third grade level, their expectation is not going to be a multi-paragraph essay. It's going to be maybe one paragraph, maybe for some kids a couple of sentences, but they're still using the same topics from that grade level and the same formatting. And of course, each student might have a different expectation, even in your group of special education for sixth grade. So again, we're always here to help if you have a specific challenge and you're like, oh my gosh, I just can't figure out how to make this work with the students I have in my group. Okay, let's see what else we got. I'm going to take about 2 more questions. So if you have not joined yet and you're looking to join, please do that now. So I want to make sure you all get the amazing reading bonuses. Okay, let's see. We have a couple of questions about supporting our kinders. So I know that it can be a challenge with all of the direct reading instruction you're doing for these kiddos to fit in that writing piece. But I have seen actually a lot of questions while I was giving the training as well about this. So with our kindergartners, the way that we make sure that we're still providing writing instruction as a part of our literacy block when they're not quite ready to start writing is that we have foundational lessons in the first couple months that really ease them into it. So we're working on those foundational skills like pencil grip. We're working towards eventually letter formation once they know they're able to write. When we're ready to progress into actual writing, it's broken down and scaffolded so heavily. So we're talking about sentence frames and heavily scaffolded lessons. So we really ease them into it. I know that a lot of you have kindergartners who come to you who cannot read yet. So our program is great for you. It is set up in that way. It's also set up to the point where if your students are still struggling a few months in and they're not ready to start writing a sentence, we have additional tools for you to use with them so that you can make those connections to their reading lessons. Whatever you're doing and during your phonics time can spill into your writing time, and you can use those tools to get extra practice until they are ready to really start encoding those words down onto their paper. So we try to make it as flexible as possible and make it so that it's reasonable, because we know that you get a lot of kiddos who aren't ready for it the first few months in kindergarten. And then likewise in first grade, if we have students who are really still struggling with reading skills, we know that's going to be a struggle for writing. So we do that foundational unit to really ease them in, make sure those skills are there, give you a chance to really see where those deficits are and really help your students fill in those gaps when it's time to work more closely with them. So we do have a system in place for those lower grades. I know it's so hard. I feel like, teaching writing is a challenge in the upper grades, but not nearly the challenge that it is in kinder and first and second grades. So I have a lot of respect for you all, and I'm so happy that we're going to be able to support more of you after this training, because this is just something that is setting up the students for success as they get into those older grades. Okay, last question I'm gonna answer. I did see a couple people mention specific curriculum that their school is using that they don't feel like is cutting it. And I'm not gonna call out any names or anything like that. That would not be professional, but I do want to address what to do if you feel like your school is using curriculum that's outdated, doesn't follow the research, or just doesn't have the writing piece that you're looking for. If you are able to use supplementals, obviously this program's not a supplemental, but if you're able to make a substitution to and add to your writing block, I definitely recommend our program. If you are looking for something where you want that change to be completely school-wide, please reach out to us. We have worked with a lot of principals and district administrators where we have had a teacher reach out and say, hey, I really want to get this program in place. A lot of times they've already purchased it from us and they're using it and seeing that success. And then their colleagues are noticing and they want to bring it school-wide. And sometimes it's just somebody who hasn't purchased it yet, but really knows that they need it, and we need to work with the principals to kind of discuss the purpose for it when you already have an ELA program that maybe is not cutting it. So we do have a lot of documentation that you can send. We have the research. We have a letter that you can share with your principals. So please email us, help@simplifywriting.com. If that's the case, whether or not you are already owning the program. We work with a lot of administrators who are really open to these ideas, and they know that there needs to be a change because they've seen the ELA scores, especially the portion that includes writing. And so sometimes they just need something to jump in front of their face and say, hi, we're here to solve this problem. So just let us know, and we're really happy to help. We can actually even meet one-on-one with them on Zoom, see what questions they have, what we can provide solutions for. And usually once they see what we have available and the pricing, and that includes the training, they're usually very happy to try to get it funded, because we are the most affordable program that I know of that includes all of this. So, okay, I'm so sorry that I missed so many questions, but I do have to get off because we're way over time. I don't want to take any more of your time, but please do email me. I'd love to talk to you. I'd love to answer your questions that I missed. help@simplifywriting.com. For those of you who joined while we were on this training, I cannot wait to work with you. I hope you love the reading bonus. And if you're a kinder, first or second grade teacher, please make sure you come back and check your dashboard because we're adding things all the time because we're actively working on that bonus right now. So you're going to be pretty excited to see some things in there. Okay, thank you all so much. I really appreciate you dedicating the time to this topic, and I hope that we can work together and really help get these research-based practices put into your classroom in a way that's really easy and manageable for you. All right, thank you so much.